What happens when a warrior's strength is measured not only by the enemies he can destroy, but by the lives he chooses to save? What happens when humanity survives the process of becoming a space marine? What happens is the Salamanders. Among the Adeptus Astartes, few chapters are as respected or as unusual as the Sons of Vulkan. Forged in the fires of the volcanic world of Nocturne, these black-skinned warriors are shaped by hardship, sacrifice, and duty. They are master craftsmen, guardians of ancient traditions, and relentless hunters of the enemies of mankind. But for all their power, it is not their skill at war that sets them apart. It is their humanity. In a galaxy where life is cheap, billions perish without notice, and entire worlds are sacrificed on a whim, the Salamanders have earned a reputation for something almost unheard of amongst the Space Marines: compassion. They remember the why behind their creation and fight not for humanity as an abstract whole, but for individual human lives. While other chapters may view such compassion as weakness, the Salamanders see it as the very reason they wage war at all. But as we will soon see, compassion comes at a cost. Beneath this reputation for nobility, however, lies a chapter every bit as formidable as its peers, and just as capable of committing atrocities when the Imperium demands it. They hail from a world of volcanoes and ash, wield weapons capable of reducing tanks to molten slag, and bring total ruin to the enemies of the Emperor. Their mercy for the innocent is only matched by their fury towards the guilty. To understand the Salamanders is to understand a chapter built upon a simple but increasingly rare ideal within the Imperium: that power exists to protect, not only to destroy, consume, or control. And to understand why they believe that, we must begin with the world that forged them and the Primarch, whose legacy continues to burn within every Salamander. Like all of the infant Primarchs, Vulkan was scattered across the galaxy by the Chaos Gods during the Emperor's great genetic experiment and came to rest upon a distant world. His destination was Nocturne, a planet of volcanic fury and unforgiving hardship, where survival demanded strength, resilience, and self-sacrifice from every soul born upon its surface. There, the infant Primarch was discovered and raised by a Forge Master. Even as a child, Vulkan displayed gifts far beyond those of ordinary men. His immense strength was matched by an equally formidable intellect, and within only a few short years, he was teaching the craftsmen of Nocturne techniques and knowledge long thought lost to history. As he grew, so did his reputation, until he became a leader among the people of the world and a protector against the many dangers that threatened them. Even in those early years, that role as protector was already being tested. When a Drukhari raiding force struck his settlement, Vulkan refused to take shelter. Armed only with a pair of smith's hammers, he confronted the attackers directly, rallying the scattered townsfolk and driving the raiders back, killing hundreds of the Drukhari in the process. But one of the most significant moments in the life of each Primarch is their reunion with the Emperor. And in the case of Vulkan, the experience would go on to shape his legacy substantially. According to the ancient legends of Nocturne, the Emperor arrived upon the world disguised as a wandering stranger during celebrations held in Vulkan's honor. Rather than revealing himself immediately, he challenged the young Primarch to a series of contests and trials. Vulkan accepted, and the two performed feats that no ordinary mortal could hope to match. But on the final day, their scores were tied. And so, as the ultimate challenge, the pair were each to construct themselves a weapon of absolute quality and use it to hunt one of Nocturne's colossal, fire-dwelling salamanders. Yet, it was not Vulkan's actions that would define the lesson of the contest, but those of the stranger who challenged him. As the hunt drew to a close, Vulkan succeeded in slaying a monstrous fire drake of immense size, a beast worthy of legend even upon Nocturne. But on his journey home, the earth split open beneath him and a river of molten lava surged up from the depths. Exhausted after days of trials, Vulkan found himself dangling above the fiery torrent, one hand gripping the rock face and the other refusing to release the tail of his hard-won trophy. Then the stranger appeared. Though he had slain an even larger beast, he cast down his own prize into the lava, sacrificing any hope of victory. The carcass formed a bridge towards the molten river, allowing allowing him to reach Vulkan and pull the Primarch to safety. Together, they returned to the settlement, where the elders declared Vulkan the victor, for the stranger had returned empty-handed. But it was not triumph that mattered to Vulkan. He had witnessed a warrior willing to abandon glory, achievement, and victory in order to save another. In that moment, he recognized a strength far greater than physical power. He knelt before the stranger and pledged his loyalty, declaring that any man willing to place another life above his own success was a man worthy of service. Only then did the stranger reveal his true identity. The master of mankind had come to Nocturne, and father and son were finally reunited. Whether every detail of the tale is true matters little. What endures is the lesson it leaves behind. For 10,000 years, the Salamanders have sought to embody those same ideals. Their compassion, their craftsmanship, honor, sense of duty, and enduring connection to the people they protect can all be traced back to the example set by their Primarch. After his reunion with the Emperor, Vulkan assumed command of the 18th Legion. He found his sons locked in a desperate war of attrition against a vast Orc invasion, outnumbered many times over and fighting a series of rearguard actions to protect and evacuate Imperial citizens. Though battered and isolated, the Legion had refused to abandon those under its protection, choosing instead to stand and die if necessary so that others might live. Learning of their plight, Vulkan traveled to join them, bringing thousands of newly recruited warriors from Nocturne along with fresh warships, weapons, and supplies. Falling upon the Orcs with sudden and overwhelming force, the Primarch and his reinforcements broke the siege and turned what had seemed an inevitable defeat into a decisive victory. It is what followed that left the deepest impression upon the Legion, however. When the surviving warriors knelt before their newly discovered Gene Father, Vulkan ordered them to rise. Rather than demand their loyalty, he honored the sacrifices they had made and the countless lives they had saved. In that moment, the warriors of the 18th Legion saw reflected in their Primarch the very ideas for which they had fought. In honor of his homeworld and the great drakes of Nocturne, Vulkan renamed the 18th Legion the Salamanders and began reshaping it in his own image. During the Great Crusade, Vulkan earned a reputation unlike that of many of his brothers. Where others often viewed the citizens of the Imperium through the lens of strategy, logistics, or conquest, Vulkan and his Salamanders never forgot the people they existed to protect. Combined with his mastery of the forge and his ability to create weapons and artifacts of extraordinary quality, he came to be respected not only as a ferocious warrior, but as a craftsman, a protector, and a leader. Yet Vulkan possessed another gift, one that would remain hidden for much of his life. Like the Emperor himself, Vulkan was a perpetual, a rare, mysterious form of human capable of returning from death no matter how catastrophic the injury inflicted upon them. This extraordinary ability only became known during the Horus Heresy. At the drop site massacre on Istvan V, Vulkan and the Salamanders fought alongside the Iron Hands and Raven Guard in what was believed to be a loyalist counterattack against the forces of Warmaster Horus. Instead, it proved to be one of the greatest betrayals in Imperial history. As the battle raged, several Space Marine legions revealed their allegiance to Horus and turned upon their former allies. The slaughter that followed was one of the darkest moments in Imperial history. Entire companies were annihilated, and the Salamanders suffered losses so severe that the Legion would never fully recover. Vulkan himself survived the traitor's devastating orbital bombardment, only to find himself surrounded by overwhelming enemy forces. After a desperate last stand, he was eventually captured by his brother Primarch, Conrad Kurz of the Night Lords. What followed was months of imprisonment and torment. Obsessed with breaking Vulkan's spirit, Kurz subjected his captive brother to endless torture, repeatedly killing him in increasingly horrific ways. But each time that Vulkan died, he returned, beheaded, dismembered, burned, shot, or cast into the void of space. The Primarch regenerated again and again, revealing for the first time the true extent of his immortal nature. Kurz ultimately failed to break him. Despite every torment inflicted, Vulkan endured, escaping captivity and continuing the fight against the Warmaster. However, the ordeal left deep scars upon his mind. In the aftermath of his captivity, Vulkan was found by loyalist forces with a severely fractured mental state. Consumed by trauma and visions, he became unstable and dangerous, driven by an obsessive fixation on Conrad Kurz and the horrors he had endured. In the chaos of the heresy, Vulkan was eventually struck down once more by his own allies using a relic known as a Fulgurite, a weapon believed to be capable of killing even a perpetual. In that moment, it was believed that even his immortal nature had finally been extinguished, ending the long suffering that had defined his captivity. But the story did not end there. Refusing to accept their Primarch's death, the surviving Salamanders carried Vulkan's body back to Nocturne through the storms of the Ruined Storm, fighting traitor forces every step of the way. Led by First Captain Artellus Numion, they brought him to Mount Deathfire and cast him into the Unbound Flame, believing the sacred fires of the world might restore him. Days passed with nothing but silence, and as hope began to fade, Numion offered his own life in a final devotion, surrendering himself to the flames as a last act of faith in the Primarch's revival. And then, whether through fate, faith, or the unknowable nature of his perpetual existence, Vulkan rose once more. After his rebirth, he withdrew from most of the Imperium's wider conflict, and the details of his later actions remain largely shrouded in mystery. In the centuries that followed the heresy, Vulkan continued to guide his sons before eventually vanishing from the chapter altogether. Before his disappearance, however, he left behind 9 sacred artifacts of his own creation for his legion to find, scattering them across the galaxy. To this day, the Salamanders believe that when all 9 artifacts have been recovered, Vulkan will return to his sons in the Imperium's darkest hour. Whether prophecy, myth, or promise, the hope of Vulkan's return has endured for 10,000 years, burning as brightly as the forge fires of Nocturne itself. And speaking of Nocturne, it is one of the most hostile inhabited worlds within the Imperium. Officially classified as both a death world and a feudal world, it is a place where fire and destruction are woven into the fabric of everyday life. The planet forms part of an unusual binary system with its enormous moon, Prometheus. So massive is this satellite that its shifting gravitational pull constantly tears at Nocturne's crust, triggering volcanic eruptions, earthquakes, and continent-spanning disasters on a regular basis. Entire mountain ranges are reshaped by tectonic upheaval, while rivers of lava carve fresh scars across the landscape. As a result, much of Nocturne's surface is a blackened wasteland of ash deserts, volcanic plains, and smoking mountain ranges. The atmosphere is perpetually choked with dust and soot from countless eruptions, shrouding the world beneath a permanent haze and casting much of the landscape in an eerie twilight glow. To survive, the people of Nocturne have retreated underground. Vast fortress cities known as sanctuary cities are built deep beneath the planet's surface, protected from the worst of the world's fury by layers of rock, adamantium, and powerful defensive systems. It is within these subterranean realms that the clans of Nocturne live, work, and raise their families. Society on Nocturne is organized around tightly bound clan structures, and life upon the Death World is never truly settled. The population is often forced to migrate across the world in response to shifting volcanic activity, collapsing mountain ranges, and changing patterns of destruction. Entire communities may abandon ancestral homes and undertake long journeys across the ash wastes in search of safety. Survival depends not only upon strength, but upon cooperation, self-reliance, and an unbreakable sense of loyalty to one's clan. However, even these mighty sanctuary cities are not immune to the planet's greatest trial. Once every 15 Terran years, Prometheus passes particularly close to Nocturne in an event known as the Time of Trial. The moon's gravitational influence unleashes catastrophic upheaval across the entire world. Volcanoes erupt by the thousands, earthquakes shatter entire regions. What follows is often just as deadly. A harsh volcanic winter descends upon the planet, bringing famine, starvation, and a bitter cold. For the people of Nocturne, survival is never guaranteed. Entire settlements can disappear in a single night. Families must rebuild again and again and again across generations. Yet from this hardship comes resilience. The people of Nocturne have endured these disasters for millennia, emerging as a culture defined by endurance, self-reliance, and communal sacrifice. It is no coincidence that these same values later became the foundation of the Salamanders chapter itself. The world is also home to some of the most dangerous creatures in the Imperium. Among them are the colossal fire drakes, immense fire-breathing reptiles that dwell within the volcanic regions surrounding Mount Deathfire. Other great drakes and predatory beasts roam the volcanic regions surrounding Mount Deathfire, and it is from these legendary creatures that the Salamanders draw much of their symbolism, mythology, and even their name. Life on Nocturne serves as a trial long before any aspirant is selected by the chapter. Those who survive to adulthood have already endured hardships that would break most Imperial citizens. Prometheus is unlike the fortress monasteries of many other chapters. Because Nocturne is far too unstable to support a permanent stronghold of such scale, Vulkan established the Salamanders' fortress monastery upon the moon instead. Known simply as Prometheus, it serves as the chapter's primary dockyard, armory, and logistical center, where battle barges are repaired, recruits undergo their transformation into Astartes, and the chapter's most sacred relics are safeguarded. Within its halls lie the Pantheon, where matters of great importance are debated by the chapter's leaders. The Hall of the Fire Drakes, adorned with the hides of legendary drakes slain by Salamander heroes, and the Hall of Relics, where artifacts dating back to the days of Vulkan himself are preserved. Despite its importance, Prometheus remains remarkably austere by the standards of other chapters. It exists not as a realm unto itself, but as a place of duty, a fortress from which the Salamanders wage war before eventually returning home to the people of Nocturne. When not engaged in campaigns across the stars, many battle brothers return to the surface and live among the clans from which they were recruited. Though still revered as near mythical warriors, they remain connected to their families, communities, and traditions. Few chapters maintain such close ties to the people they protect. This constant connection helps explain one of the Salamanders' most defining traits. For them, the citizens of the Imperium are never reduced to statistics, resources, or collateral damage. They are individuals, families, communities, people not unlike those they once lived beside beneath the mountains of Nocturne. Even the Salamanders themselves bear the mark of their homeworld. The interaction between their gene seed and Nocturne's unique environment causes their skin to darken to a deep ebony black, while their eyes glow a vivid red. Combined with an enhanced ability to perceive heat through the volcanic darkness, these features have become among the most recognizable traits of Vulkan's sons. Nocturne is not merely the Salamander's home, it is the crucible that forged them. To understand the Salamanders, one must first understand the Promethium Cult. It is their spiritual tradition and philosophical belief system. At its core, the Promethium Cult calls upon its followers to emulate the example set by Vulkan. Its teachings encourage strength through hardship, service to others before oneself, and unwavering loyalty to humanity. One of the cult's central beliefs is that true wisdom can only be gained through periods of isolation and self-reflection. Prometheans teach that only by withdrawing from others and confronting one's own thoughts can an individual truly understand themselves, honor Vulkan's legacy, and better serve the Emperor's will. As a result, meditation, solitude, and personal reflection are considered essential virtues among the Salamanders. Fire occupies a sacred place within these traditions. To the Salamanders, flame is not merely a weapon, but a symbol of purification, renewal, and spiritual strength. Before major undertakings, warriors often undergo rituals involving flames, believing themselves to be cleansed through pain and hardship. Trials involving burning coals, heated metals, and ritual endurance are commonplace throughout the chapter. The forge is equally revered. The hammer, often known as Vulkan's sigil, alongside the anvil and forge, serve as sacred symbols of the faith. The act of creation is viewed as an expression of devotion, and mastery of craftsmanship remains one of the highest callings a salamander can pursue. Promethean ceremonies are often accompanied by readings from the Canticle of Immolation, an ancient ritual text held sacred by the chapter and commonly recited by salamander chaplains during important rites and observances. Perhaps the most visible expression of the Promethean faith is the chapter's tradition of ritual branding. Specially trained chapter serfs, known as brand priests, are assigned to individual salamanders and may serve alongside them for centuries. These attendants administer intricate ritual scars that commemorate a warrior's victories, honors, and years of service. No salamander enters battle without first receiving a ceremonial brand, and another is often added when the campaign ends. Over decades and centuries, these markings accumulate into a living record of a warrior's life. Each scar tells a story. Each mark represents a battle won, a sacrifice endured, or a duty fulfilled. Veteran salamanders often bear hundreds of such scars across their bodies, while only the most honored of warriors possess enough markings to extend onto their faces. The chapter's current master, Tushan, is said to bear so many honor markings that there is no remaining space upon his flesh, forcing new honors to be inscribed instead directly onto his armor. Pilots are granted a unique exception to the chapter's traditions, often bearing facial brands far earlier than other salamanders. Many display the dactyl's sigil, a symbol representing one of Nocturne's predatory flying beasts. The great dregs of Nocturne also occupy an important place within Promethean tradition. The ancient reptilian creatures from which the chapter takes its name are revered within salamander folklore, with legendary beasts remembered for centuries after their deaths. Their hides are prized relics, their deeds woven into chapter mythology, and those drakes slain by salamanders are often remembered and honored alongside the warriors who defeated them. For those facing a crisis of faith or purpose, the Promethium Cult offers one final test. Known as the Burning Walk, this ritual requires a salamander to leave the chapter behind and venture alone into the deadly deserts of Nocturne, armed with nothing more than traveler's robes and a walking staff. There, amidst the unforgiving wilderness, they seek answers to the doubts that plague them. Few who undertake the Burning Walk ever return, but those who do are often transformed by the experience. Despite its unusual customs, the Promethium Cult is not considered heretical. Because it promotes devotion to the Emperor and reverence for Vulkan, it has been formally recognized by the Ecclesiarchy as an accepted variation of the Imperial Creed. However, their approval is greatly hesitant, tense at best. More than a religion, the Promethium Cult is a foundation upon which the salamanders have built their entire identity. It is the reason they endure hardship without complaint, why they value craftsmanship as highly as warfare, and why they continue to place service and sacrifice above personal glory. Every forge, every scar, every trial by fire ultimately serves the same purpose: to create warriors worthy of a legacy left behind by their Primarch. Like many Space Marine chapters, the Salamanders recruit exclusively from the population of their homeworld. Unlike most chapters, however, the path to becoming a salamander begins long before an aspirant receives a single gene seed implant. Children judged to possess the necessary potential are selected from the clans of Nocturne at a young age and apprenticed to members of the chapter. For years, they are trained not only as warriors but as craftsmen, learning the skills of the forge that occupy such an important place within salamander culture. Patience, discipline, and dedication are considered just as important as physical strength. Only the most promising candidates progress beyond this stage. Those who do are subjected to rigorous scrutiny by the chapter's apothecaries and chaplains, who determine whether they possess both the character and biological compatibility required to survive the transformation into a Space Marine. The final trials draw heavily upon the legends of Vulkan himself. Aspirants must overcome a series of ordeals designed to test their endurance, courage, and self-reliance, culminating in the hunting and slaying of one of Nocturne's great salamanders upon the slopes of Mount Deathfire. Those few who survive these trials are transported to the Salamander's fortress monastery upon Prometheus, where they begin the long and perilous process of gene seed implantation. The Salamanders broadly adhere to the Codex Astartes, but their organization deviates in several important ways shaped by the realities of Nocturne and the teachings of the Promethium Cult. Most significantly, the chapter fields just 6 companies of Astartes. Alongside these stands a small 7th company of roughly 60 scout neophytes. This reduced number of companies compared to a standard Codex 10 is in part due to the Salamanders' chronically reduced strength, and in part because each of these companies represents one of the 7 realms of Nocturne. Unlike many of their brother chapters, the Salamanders do not consecrate their veterans into rigid elite formations. Experience is instead distributed throughout the companies, allowing seasoned warriors to serve directly as mentors and exemplars within the ranks they fight alongside. The Salamanders are known to place the protection of civilian lives above strict tactical efficiency, often taking significant risks to ensure evacuations are completed or populations are spared from destruction. In doing so, they frequently find themselves at odds with more pragmatic Imperial forces, for whom such restraint can appear costly, reckless, and dangerously idealistic. Within Salamander doctrine, it is not viewed as deviation from duty, but as its purest expression. To them, the Imperium is not an abstract institution to be preserved at any cost, but something made real through the lives of its people. This philosophy influences every aspect of how the chapter wages war. While the Salamanders broadly adhere to the tactical doctrines laid down within the Codex Astartes, they have developed their own distinct battlefield identity. Above all else, the Salamanders favor decisive close-range engagements. Their battle brothers advance behind storms of flame and superheated energy, wielding flamers and melter guns in far greater numbers than most chapters. Infantry formations are scoured from existence beneath sheets of burning promethium, while enemy armor is reduced to molten wreckage by concentrated melter fire. Once the distance closes, thunderhammers and power weapons finish what the flames began. This preference for close-quarters warfare is reinforced by the chapter's unusual relationship with technology and craftsmanship. Since even the most junior battle brother possesses the knowledge required to maintain, repair, and modify his own equipment, the chapter's artificers and tech marines are able to devote far more of their efforts to creating exceptional war gear rather than simply maintaining it. The results can be seen throughout the chapter. Salamanders are renowned for deploying an unusually large number of master-crafted weapons, artificer-forged suits of armor, and ancient relics whose origins stretch back centuries or even millennia. Their armories are among the finest in the Adeptus Astartes, further strengthened by long-standing ties with the Adeptus Mechanicus and the rich mineral wealth of Nocturne. Their battlefield doctrine also reflects the environment that produced them. The crushing gravity and unstable conditions of their homeworld make extensive training with high-speed assault vehicles difficult, leading the chapter to place less emphasis on rapid attack formations than many of their peers. Instead, the Salamanders excel in methodical advances, defensive warfare, and grinding battles of attrition, relying upon disciplined infantry, heavy firepower, and elite veteran formations to wear down the enemy. Some Imperial observations claim the Salamanders possess marginally slower reflexes than other Space Marines, though they are still vastly superior to those of any unaugmented human. Whether this is a result of genetic drift or some other quirk of their gene seed remains uncertain. What is certain is that they have long adapted to it. Rather than relying upon speed, they place their faith in preparation, discipline, resilience, and an almost unmatched capacity to endure. Few chapters can match their determination once committed to a battle. The Salamanders are renowned for holding ground under impossible circumstances, fighting on long after others would have withdrawn, and refusing to yield even when heavily outnumbered. They advance relentlessly, absorb punishing losses, and continue the fight until their objective is secured or they are physically incapable of carrying on. Nowhere are these qualities more evident than among the Fire Drakes, the chapter's elite First Company veterans. Drawn from those who have demonstrated exceptional skill and unwavering devotion to the ideals of Vulkan, the Fire Drakes represent the very pinnacle of Salamander warfare. Most commonly clad in exquisitely crafted Terminator armor, these veterans serve as shock troops, line breakers, and living bulwarks in the chapter's most dangerous campaigns. Where resistance is fiercest or the line is closest to collapse, it is often the fire drakes who are sent to restore order through sheer force of will and arms. To face them is to confront everything the Salamanders aspire to be: patient, relentless, and utterly unbreakable. For the Salamanders, war is not won through speed or spectacle, it is won through endurance, discipline, and the steady application of overwhelming force. Like the mastercrafted weapons they carry into battle, they are shaped by heat, pressure, and hardship until only strength remains. Amongst the wider Adeptus Astartes, the Salamanders occupy a position that is as much contested as it is respected. Certain chapters regard them with genuine admiration, none more so than the Imperial Fists, who recognize in Vulkan's sons a shared stubborn endurance and an unyielding refusal to abandon a duty once it has been sworn. Both chapters are defined by holding ground when survival is uncertain, and there exists a quiet respect between them, forged through mutual understanding rather than ceremony. However, among the more strategically orthodox chapters, the Salamanders are often viewed with increasing frustration. The Ultramarines in particular represent a stark doctrinal contrast. Where Guilliman's sons prioritize efficiency, force multiplication, and the preservation of long-term operational stability, the Salamanders are willing to compromise broader strategy if it means saving lives in the present moment. To the Ultramarines' way of thinking, such choices are not noble, they are destabilizing, risking entire campaigns for outcomes that cannot always be strategically justified. This divide extends beyond simple doctrine into philosophy. To some within the wider Astartes, the Salamander's compassion is not seen as virtue but as a liability, an emotional burden that can cloud judgment in the crucible of war. Though even among those who criticize them most harshly, there is an unspoken acknowledgement. When the Imperium's most vulnerable stand on the edge of annihilation, it is often the Salamanders who are still there when the smoke clears. The Salamanders have produced countless heroes across their long history, but a handful of individuals stand out as the living embodiment of the chapter's ideals in the current age of the Imperium. Foremost among them is Chapter Master Tushan, Regent of Prometheus and one of the most respected Chapter Masters in the Imperium. Renowned for his wisdom, courage, and unwavering sense of duty, Tushan has become a symbol of everything the Salamanders strive to be. During the Third War for Armageddon, he and his warriors earned the admiration of millions through their relentless efforts to defend civilian populations, escort refugee columns to safety, and stand between the innocent and annihilation. Few leaders better embody Vulkan's belief that strength exists to protect. Among Tushan's most trusted commanders is Captain Adrax Agatone, Master of the Third Company. A veteran of countless campaigns, Agatone rose to command following the death of Captain Nikelm, and would go on to distinguish himself during the Jevion campaign, where he led the brutal fighting around the Ferren Straits. Like many Salamander heroes, he combines formidable battlefield skill with the patience and determination for which the chapter is famous. Another towering figure within the chapter is Chaplain Elysius, bearer of Vulkan's sigil and one of the Salamander's greatest spiritual leaders. His path was forged through hardship and failure. As a scout, a youthful overconfidence led him to a disastrous mission that cost the life of a fellow brother and left another permanently scarred. The experience marked him deeply, shaping him into a far more reflective and disciplined warrior. Over the centuries that followed, Elysius became renowned for his wisdom, his fiery sermons, and his ability to unite those around him. The Salamander's commitment to preserving their legacy is exemplified by Master Apothecary Harath Shan, known throughout the chapter as the Defender of the Final Vault. A veteran apothecary of exceptional skill and courage, Shen earned particular renown during the Badab War. When enemy forces bombarded the battle barge Pyre of Glory, he led the desperate defense of the chapter's gene seed vaults, safeguarding the genetic inheritance of future generations of salamanders at tremendous personal risk. Finally, perhaps no salamander bears a greater burden than Vulkan Histan, the chapter's Forge Father. A mighty warrior in his own right and once captain of the 4th Company, Histan now carries a responsibility unlike any other within the chapter. Guided by the sacred Tome of Fire, he roams the galaxy in search of the lost relics of Vulkan. For most chapters, the loss of their Primarch is an unimaginable tragedy. For the Salamanders, it is an unfinished story. They do not mourn Vulkan, they wait for him. Nearly 1,000 years after the Horus Heresy, during the cataclysmic War of the Beast, the Primarch led humanity against one of the greatest Orc invasions in Imperial history. His final recorded act came upon the world of Ulanor, later known as Armageddon, where he confronted the monstrous Orc warlord known simply as the Beast. The battle ended in sacrifice. Even Vulkan could not overcome the Beast through strength alone. The monstrous Orc proved a foe unlike anything he had faced before, and as the Primarch neared defeat, he made one final choice. Seizing his enemy in a desperate last act, Vulkan dragged the Beast into the core of a massive Orc reactor, triggering a cataclysmic explosion that consumed them both. And then, he was gone. For any other Primarch, such an ending would have marked the conclusion of their story, but as a perpetual, Vulkan had survived death countless times before. Whether he truly perished upon Ulanor, was cast somewhere else by the explosion, or continues to wander the galaxy unseen, remains one of the greatest mysteries of Imperial history. But long before his disappearance, Vulkan left a final challenge for his sons. The Tome of Fire, now under the care of Forge Master Histan, is a sacred text containing prophecies, teachings, and cryptic clues concerning 9 artifacts of immense significance. Rather than bequeathing these relics directly to his sons, Vulkan scattered them across the galaxy. The Tome of Fire teaches that only when all 9 artifacts have been reunited will the chapter finally prove itself worthy of the Primarch's return. Then, in humanity's darkest hour, Vulkan will emerge once more and lead his sons in a final war against the enemies of mankind. Over the millennia, generations of Salamanders have devoted themselves to this quest. 5 of the 9 relics have already been recovered. The Spear of Vulkan, Kisara's Mantle, and the Gauntlet of the Forge are currently carried by Vulkan Histan himself, while the Chalice of Fire and the Eye of Vulkan are safeguarded within the chapter's fortress monastery upon Prometheus. But 4 artifacts remain lost. Somewhere among the countless stars of the Imperium lie the Engine of Woes, the Obsidian Chariot, the Unbound Flame, and the Song of Entropy. Until these final relics are found, the Primarch's greatest test remains incomplete, and the chapter's long vigil continues. Whether this is prophecy, allegory, or a true promise left behind by an immortal Primarch is impossible to know. As long as even one relic remains unfound, the search continues. Somewhere among the stars, Vulkan Histan still walks in his Primarch's footsteps, pursuing a quest that has endured for 10,000 years. And if the ancient prophecies of the Tome of Fire are true, then one day, that journey will end. The final relic will be recovered. The test will be complete, and Vulkan will return. While discussion surrounding the Salamanders often focuses on their mighty heroes and sacred relics, their legacy has also been forged by the parts they played in the galaxy's greatest wars. Across 10 millennia of service, the 18th Legion has stood at the heart of some of the Imperium's most notorious conflicts, not as architects of conquest, but as defenders of humanity caught in the path of destruction. Their earliest and most defining tragedy came during the Istvan V dropsite massacre. The Salamanders entered the battle expecting to strike a decisive blow against Horus, only to be caught in one of the greatest betrayals in Imperial history. The Legion was devastated, suffering losses so severe it would never again recover its former strength. The consequences of Istvan would shape the Salamanders for the next 10,000 years. Unlike many first founding chapters, they never possessed the numbers, political influence, or military resources of their larger cousins. Forced to rebuild from near extinction, the chapter's culture places extraordinary value upon every battle brother, every suit of armor, and every fragment of gene seed. Their emphasis on self-reliance, craftsmanship, endurance, and careful stewarding of resources can all be traced, at least in part, to the scars left by that catastrophe. Even in the current era, the Salamanders remain one of the smaller first founding chapters. They would later play a significant role in the War of the Beast, the same conflict that ultimately saw the disappearance of their Primarch. As mankind faced an Orc empire unlike anything it had encountered since the Great Crusade, the Salamanders fought across multiple war zones as part of a desperate Imperial response to a threat that brought the Imperium to the brink of collapse. While the Primarch fought at the center of the conflict, his sons continued to embody the values he had taught them. Throughout the war, Salamander forces became known for holding evacuation routes, shielding refugee movements, and refusing to abandon civilian populations even in the face of overwhelming enemy pressure. Amid a conflict that threatened the survival of the Imperium itself, they remained steadfast in their belief that the purpose of victory was not merely to defeat the enemy, but to preserve the lives of those they had been created to protect. More recently, during the Third War for Armageddon, another one of the largest Orc invasions in Imperial history, the Salamanders once again distinguished themselves on the ground. Across the embattled war zones of Armageddon Secundus and its surrounding systems, they became renowned for their repeated efforts to extract civilians from active combat zones, escorting refugee columns through collapsing front lines, and holding key defensive positions long enough for evacuation efforts to succeed. These actions often came at significant tactical cost, drawing criticism from more strategically rigid Imperial commanders, but cementing the chapter's reputation among the common people as protectors first, warriors second. Across these wars, a consistent pattern emerges. Whether facing betrayal from within Legionis Astartes, the overwhelming tides of an Orc empire, or the grinding attrition of modern Imperial warfare, the Salamanders repeatedly make the same choice. Not the most effective victory, but the one that ensures humanity survives to see another day. At the end of the 41st millennium, as the Imperium entered its darkest age since the Horus Heresy, the Salamanders found themselves facing challenges unlike any in their history. The birth of the Great Rift tore the galaxy in two, isolating entire sectors and unleashing fresh horrors across countless worlds. Like many chapters, the already strained Salamanders suffered heavy losses during these turbulent years, but aid would eventually arrive from an unexpected source. During the opening stages of the Indomitus Crusade, Rabute Guilliman dispatched a torchbearer fleet to Nocturne, carrying both Primaris reinforcements and the means to create more warriors from Salamander gene seed. Though some within the chapter initially regarded these newcomers with caution since they had not experienced the traditions and hardships of Nocturne, such doubts gradually faded. Through service alongside their new brothers, the Primaris Marines proved themselves worthy heirs to Vulkan's legacy. The arrival of the Primaris also ensured that Vulkan's lineage would not only survive, but expand across the Imperium. Several new successor chapters were founded from Salamander gene seed during this era, carrying the teachings of the Promethium Cult to distant corners of the galaxy. In the era of the Indomitus Crusade, the Salamanders continued to serve across the length and breadth of the Imperium, whether battling Chaos warbands spilling from the Great Rift, defending isolated Imperial worlds, or hunting the enemies of mankind amidst the darkness between the stars. They remained steadfast in their purpose. And now, as war once again gathers around Armageddon, a world forever linked to both Vulkan and the chapter's modern legacy, the Salamanders find themselves preparing to return to one of the most important battlefields in their history. In a galaxy defined by indifference, the Salamanders remain unusual not because they reject their role as warriors, but because they refuse to forget what that role is for. Where other Astartes may see sacrifice as a strategic necessity, the Salamanders see it as something that must always be justified, measured not only in victory or defeat, but in the lives that remain when the smoke has cleared. In that difference lies both their greatest strength and the reason they are remembered so differently. The Salamanders are every bit as deadly as their brothers. They wield fire and destruction with unparalleled skill. They descend into the darkest war zones of the Imperium and face horrors capable of breaking entire worlds. Yet beneath the ceramite, beneath the ritual scars, and beneath 10,000 years of warfare, they have retained something that many believed impossible for a space marine to preserve: perspective. They remember their families hiding beneath bombardments, the refugees fleeing collapsing cities, the ordinary men and women whose lives are forever changed by the wars they never chose to fight. They remember because they came from those people, and unlike many chapters, they never truly left them behind. That belief can be traced back to a single lesson taught upon the volcanic slopes of Nocturne, the lesson Vulkan learned when the Emperor cast aside victory in order to save another life. For the Salamanders, strength has never been an end in itself. It is a responsibility. Whether defending the citizens of Armageddon, enduring the horrors of Istvan, searching for the lost relics of their vanished Primarch, or standing watch against the countless threats that emerge from the Great Rift, the Sons of Vulkan continue to uphold that ideal. And perhaps that is why the hope of Vulkan's return still burns so brightly. Not because the Salamanders need their savior, but because they are still striving to be worthy of the example that he left behind. Vulkan lives, and perhaps through his sons, he always will.